This is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. I'm going to try something a little bit different this morning. Got some new video software. I'm going to try some more higher tech video editing and features. But I wanted to do a video this morning based on the top 5. I wouldn't call them wives' tales. Maybe that's a good word for it, based on some of the things that gets passed around on the internet. But maybe the top 5 wives' tales or misconceptions about engines or engine building. So I have a list of 5. 1, stroke versus engine acceleration. 2, oil usage with pistons that have oil rail supports. 3, lighter versus heavier push rods. 4, HBeam rods are better than IBeam rods. And 5, camshaft lift determines how big a camshaft is. So I'm going to try some different things. We're going to talk about a few of these topics, and maybe you can give me a list of some other things to talk about in the comment section, and we can cover those later on. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing is basically stroke, engine crankshaft stroke versus engine acceleration or revving. If you're on a lot of the internet forums and you see a lot of discussion about this sort of thing, you will see people say long stroke crankshafts make for lazy engines. So I hear this all the time. Guys will call up wanting a 302 stroker, and they will say, I don't want the 3400 stroke because it's more of a side load on the cylinder, or because longer stroke engines don't rev easy. This really gets to be more of an issue when you get into the big block stuff, and guys will say, I don't want a 4 1/4 stroke FE. I want something short because I know that the engine will be lazy with a 4 1/4 stroke. So let me just say this: the stroke number does not have any bearing whatsoever on how quickly the engine accelerates. What does have a bearing on how quickly the engine accelerates is how light the rotating assembly is, and essentially how healthy the engine is in terms of horsepower and that sort of thing. So there's a class of NHRA that's called Mountain Motor Pro Stock. These engines are extremely large. We're talking about 800, 820 cubic inches. I think one of the guys that races has, I'm grabbing a calculator here, he has a little decal on the side of his car that says 13.5 liters. So 13.5 multiplied by 61.02 is 824 cubic inches. So I'm going to try to, through my new editing program, I'm going to try to post a link of these guys racing. And the first thing that you'll notice is that these engines are zippy as all get out. They will shift these cars at 8,500, 9,000 RPM, and when they're on the starting line and they're clearing the engines out, they rev like a chainsaw. So what I meant to tell you that goes along with this is that the stroke on some of these engines approaches 6 inches. Okay, so not a 3-inch stroke, not a 2.5-inch stroke, not even a 4-inch stroke. We're talking about 5 3/4-inch stroke to get to these cubic inch levels. So the stroke number by itself has no bearing on how quickly the engine accelerates. If you were to tear these engines down, you would notice that they have very lightweight rotating assemblies and things that help the engine accelerate. Um, One of the things that I've seen that's a big proponent of engine acceleration is compression ratio. So if you've ever grabbed a hold of a carburetor linkage with something 14 to 1, 15 to 1 compression, they're just instantaneous when you bump that throttle. So yeah, number one, stroke does not have the stroke number does not have any bearing on how quickly an engine will rev or accelerate. Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is I'm going to give credit where credit is due. This YouTuber's name is the Limo Guy at Large. This is a Mountain Motor Pro Stock video. Let's take a look at some of these engines that are in these cars. So if you notice, he's got pulling up. He's got 13.5 liters on his decal on his car. Clearing the throttle, you can hear him zip. Wamba, wamba. Let's listen to him launch. Alright, I'll pause that video right there. So you can see stroke doesn't make any difference. It's the rotating assembly weight. Okay, so the second thing is the second topic that we were going to cover is that a piston with an oil rail support will cause the engine to use oil. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, this is an oil rail support. If you notice, this piston right here has a really thick groove right here where the oil rings go, and the reason is because the wrist pin intersects the oil rings. And you see this bounced around on the forums a lot too. Oh, I don't want a piston with the wrist pin that intersects the oil rings. That'll cause the engine to use oil. That is a misconception. There are so many pistons available now, just due to longer strokes and longer rods that are available, where the wrist pin is up in the oil rail pack. This is so common, and mainly almost every 347 small block Ford that you know of will have that setup. And I know guys that are pushing 100,000 miles on the 347 small block Ford and not using any oil. So this oil rail support feeds around. Sorry, I'm having trouble with everything's backwards in the camera. But it lays down on top of this land right here and basically bridges the gap between or over top of your wrist pin, so that when you put your oil rails and your oil rail expander in, it has a good support across the wrist pin. So a lot of this stemmed, in speaking with Randy Gillis from Race Tech Pistons, a lot of the issues, kind of where this wives' tale stemmed from, is from essentially the origins of when the 347 came out, and a certain piston manufacturer that was making 347 pistons, and they were making them wrong. The shape of the piston was wrong. Pistons are not round. They have a taper to them, and they're just not what you would think they would be in terms of shape and geometry. So the pistons were made incorrectly, and guys were experiencing oil consumption, but it wasn't because of the oil ring supports, oil rail supports. You will hear some guys make an excuse by saying, Well, if you know the OEM would use them if it wasn't such a problem. Well, the OEM is original equipment manufacturers, and they don't do a lot of things because of price and cost. Each one of these little oil rail supports costs something. You use 8 of them for an engine, and if you make a million of a specific model car, think about how much money that you're costing the manufacturer there. So do not be scared of oil rail supports, and do not be scared of longer rod and a longer stroke putting side loads on the cylinder walls. That's kind of a wives' tale, also. Okay, number 3 is that you want to use the lightest push rod that you can. So we had a video several weeks ago of where I featured some different push rods. This is a hog leg 9/16 push rod. This is a 5/16 push rod. I see a lot of people comment that you go with the smaller push rods because they're lighter. Between the lifter and the rocker arm, the weight doesn't matter. So what does matter is that you have rigid valve train, and if it requires a 9/16 or a 5/8 or a tool steel push rod or whatever you need to do to keep your valve train happy, then you do that. Don't pay attention to the guys that worry about the weight, because that's essentially, I guess, what they would call sprung or unsprung weight. It doesn't matter in that situation between the lifter and the rocker arm. Okay, so number 4, HBeam rods are always better than IBeam rods. That is another misconception. H versus I refers to the cross-sectional shape of the beam, and HBeam rods are usually more expensive, and that leads people to believing that they are better rods, that the design will hold more. If that were the case, then this $1,500 Oliver rod that will support about 2,000 horsepower would not be an IBeam rod. So that's another warning that I would give to you when you're out shopping for connecting rods. Buy on what the rod itself will handle, what it's rated for, and the cost and the weight. Most of your HBeam rods seem to be a little bit on the chunkier side than your IBeam rods. So in situations such as a Ford FE that has the 4 1/4 stroke, where you use a 6 700 or 6 800 big block Chevrolet rod, the IBeam rod will be a lot lighter than the corresponding HBeam rod, and it will require less heavy metal to balance it that way. So if you buy one of those kits that way, and you end up with something like a Mahle piston that's really light, and you use an IBeam rod, chances are your balancing bill will go down. So just another warning for you. All right, number 5. Cams are, I guess, labeled by their lift, and I get this a whole lot during the week when people call and order cams, and I come back with something like a 600 lift or 630 lift, and their reply is, "Wow, that's a huge cam." When all in all, the duration is something like 219 or 220 or something like that. So I think a lot of this stems back to the 1960s and 70s, when um, cams were kind of measured by their lift. You've heard I've got a 3/4 race cam or something like that. Um, that seems to be where a lot of that stemmed from. Let me show you a Comp Cam's load catalog, and we'll show you why you shouldn't have you shouldn't be in panic mode when you see something with a 600 lift. Okay, so this is Comp Cam's load catalog. It's what I use to spec camshafts with. And this is one of the reasons why I use comp cams, is because all of these pages, and you're looking at, let me see here, up in the 150 pages full of cam lobes, hydraulic rollers, hydraulic flat tappets, solid flat tappets, solid rollers, single overhead cam, dual overhead cam. So, but getting back to what we were discussing, the lift number does not make the camshaft, and I want to show you. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay, so this TK lift roller, I use these in some pretty max effort engine builds, and if you look really close, the durations go up to 271 at 50 thousandths. But the lobe lift, is just 347 thousandths. So when we look at 347 thousandths lobe lift for a typical small block Chevrolet with a 1.5 rocker, that's 520 lift. For a typical small block Ford, 555 lift. If you use this in a Ford FE with a 1.76 rocker ratio, only 611 lift. But 271 degrees duration is a big cam. Okay, that's starting to get up into some pretty high RPM stuff. And these cams are pretty aggressive, pretty radical. But that goes to show you that this big cam has a small lift number. Okay, so you don't judge a camshaft by the lift number. Conversely speaking, if we look at some of these hydraulic roller lobes, let me show you. So HUC lobe and HLL lobe. Look at this. 213 degrees duration at 50 thousandths lift. Okay, that's around what a stock 428 Cobra Jet cam was. Okay, give or take a little bit. 213 degrees is something that I would reach for in a very low RPM motor, such as a towing application, or a very small cubic inch motor, maybe with forced induction and a really good cylinder head or something like that. But look here at the lobe lift. There's that 347 again, which means we're up in the 610s or so, and it kind of goes up from there. So let's see if we can find another one. 220 degrees duration, 220 and 30 degrees duration. That's still small, but we're getting into the 600 lift and up with those. So when you're calling in and you're telling me how big your cam is, when you just give me a lift number, some guys will just call in and say, I got this big cam, it's 650 lift. That really doesn't tell me anything. The information that I look at is advertised duration, 50 thousandths duration, 200 thousandths duration, lift, lobe separation angle, that sort of thing. So don't be shocked, okay, when I send a camshaft to your house with 600 lift or 630 lift. Your valve train is not going to come flying off your engine. That's pretty typical these days for a modern cylinder head and modern valve train and modern rocker arms, valve springs, that sort of thing. So hope that helps you on that. All right, so we're going to wrap that up here, and I may do some videos like this in the future where we address some of the things that you read on the internet that aren't quite correct. But if you have any ideas for that, then post them in the comments, and I can put my 2 cents in on those. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do that, and helps me out and maybe it'll help you out too. If I feature some things on here that you're learning or needing to know about the engine that you're building, it may do us both some good. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If I don't see you again this weekend, I hope you have a good one, and I hope you have a good start of your week coming up. All right, take care.